But as a parent, it's so much easier to stay calm and collected, to stay confident when we have that clarity based on our core value.
Welcome to the Kindness Is podcast, presented by Kind Cotton, where we take a deep dive into the true meaning of kindness. I'm your host, co-founder of Kind Cotton, Kaitlin Johnstone. Let's dive in. The amount at which I think about being a quote-unquote good parent is wild. You know, we are raising this tiny human who is going to go out into the world one day on her own, and all we want is for her to remain in community with us. How do we do that? How do we continue to develop connection, to also lead with empathy and love and kindness? Well, I sat down today with Caley, who earned her bachelor's degree in special education and her master's degree in early childhood education. And for the past 13 years, she has worked in a variety of roles. But most recently, she founded her own company, Play with Purpose. She now works as an international parent educator via a variety of modalities, including in-home visits, virtual consulting, small group coaching, and her community of like-minded caregivers. You are in for a treat with all of the things that we discussed today. If you are a parent, a caregiver, an educator, anyone who works with children, I hope you have a listen to this episode and truly take in all that it is that Caley has to offer.
I feel like as I listen to podcasts and I hear people sharing their story, and they could be like business leaders or researchers or, whomever, I find that a lot of us don't really, very few people say, that's what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to help people. And that's exactly, mine was not a linear path. I did not think this is what I'd be doing. But I remember when I was in third grade and somebody asking me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I didn't know what to say. But my only response was, I want to help people. I've always been a person that likes to come alongside people and just help. Sometimes to my detriment, I'm a fixer in recovery, I tell people. But also, I've just been always a very empathetic person, full of compassion. I was the kid that would go and sit next to the kid in the lunchroom who no one else would sit with. That was just kind of my spirit. And so when I had the opportunity to pick a major at college, I had found early intervention work. I had witnessed the power of early intervention work with toddlers through being a babysitter in high school and working with families who experienced that. So I picked education, and I got a bachelor's and master's, and just fell in love. Kids, I've always loved children. Fast forward a bunch of years of teaching and doing a bunch of different things, coaching, all of these different things. I had my first child. And when he was about a year old and moving, he started walking, I remember saying, I've got to figure out how to discipline this kid. He's getting into things he shouldn't be getting into. He's doing things he shouldn't be doing. So I went into my teacher brain and I pulled up, I was like, what are developmentally appropriate discipline practices? And I picked up a parenting book that was given to me, and it talked about spanking. And all of the research that I had read in grad school spoke out against spanking. And there were hard numbers about that. And I was like, this isn't developmentally appropriate. If we go back to the brain science about kids, we know their executive functions, blah, blah, blah. I went down this whole path, and I searched and I searched and I searched until I found systems and approaches. I found something called conscious discipline. And that kind of led to learning all kinds of just truly developmentally appropriate discipline strategies, how to help children with their behaviors. And that trickled into years of just expanding upon what is really the parent's responsibility in this, or the caregiver's responsibility, and what is the child's responsibility in this, and how do we figure out that? And so it's just been quite the journey, but that's really, it started blending my own backgrounds, like head knowledge, and also this like desperate moment of like, what do you do? What do you do when your kid
Mhm.
does this?
I feel like that's so interesting to hear because anyone who is like of entrepreneurship mindsets, they almost have this aha moment, right? And it's
Mhm,
because of like either trying to fix something in their own lives, something that's impacting
mhm.
them that you become very passionate about, or something that you witness that you become like super passionate about, and you want to have these resources for it and these ways to come at it so that it's easier for other people too, right? Like you recognize,
Mhm,
hey,
mhm.
if this is a thing for me, this is
Right.
probably a thing for other people. So that's just
100%.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I want to hear what your definition of discipline is because I come from a time, which I'm sure you come from a time where like spanking was definitely more normalized or yelling at your
Yeah.
children or you do it this way because I said so or
Mhm.
you just have to do XYZ because that's what society says and you're going to listen to me because I'm the parent figure. So what is your definition of discipline? Because I know that it's not those things, but I want the listeners to know too.
No. It's not. I think, just to kind of contrast and build upon what you said, like there's discipline for a lot of us. There's even when I say it and when I hear you say it, there's even this like tightness in my chest. There's
Mhm.
this natural kind of fear response, because it is so fear based in most of our histories, right? There is that. That just experience with it that is so uh, primitive. Like we experience it from such a young age that even though I talk about this every day, even though I live this out every day, and I really have redefined what discipline is, and I do it differently with my kids, it's still such a deep seated natural reaction when you say discipline. And so when I teach, whether it's children or adults, about discipline, I really look at it as the word that comes to mind is guidance and leadership. And just think of the leader in your life. Like think of one leader. It could be personal, it could be professional, it could be even at a large scale, like a figurehead leader, someone who you really respect and admire, and who you followed them, right? Those are the qualities. Think of those qualities of that leader that commanded respect, but not demanded, not said, you will do this or else, or if you don't do this, then this horrible thing is going to happen to you. Or no, these people they care, right? They connect with you. They're compassionate. They're patient. They go out of their way to explain things to you, to show you why it matters, right? How it matters to you. These are all things every day. That's the exhausting part of parenthood for me, right?
Mm.
Is every day coming alongside my children and guiding them, being that leader to them, being someone who is very confident and we've got this and we're going to do this. Like we can do this. And also, there's two sides, right? Balancing that with that compassion of like, whoa, I understand. I get that this is hard, and we can do hard things. Or maybe this is too much of a reach and I need to shorten it or lower it or bring them up more to be able to reach it, right? Any of those options. So that's really what I think of when I think of discipline is that true root word of discipleship, which is guidance and follower and leader, that relationship.
Yeah, that's amazing. How do you think, because I think our generation is, or as a whole, is becoming more on board with that ideology.
Hmm. Hmm.
But then you bring in outside forces, right? You
Uh-huh.
bring in
Uh-huh.
grandparents and you bring in your great Aunt May or
Uh-huh.
all of these
Uh-huh.
other people who may not be along that same path as you. What do you
Mhm.
say to parents to stay strong in those moments and knowing that you are doing what is best for your own children?
Yes, so I'm gonna throw out a term that just because the space you're in, you're gonna recognize the impetus of it, so I do not take credit of this, okay? But there's this thing that I like to call performative parenting,
Mm,
and that is when we feel outside pressure to perform a certain way because of who's watching us, right? And so maybe it's something that, like, I'll give you an example that happened last night to me. We were leaving baseball practice with my child, and he was being really silly, really goofy. And he came up and we were playing. Okay. This was not like he wasn't angry at me and lashing out. He wasn't, we were playing. And he smacked me on the booty. And there was a dad, like a dad actually, I brought equipment for the team because my husband was sick, like it was a whole thing. And so there was a dad at my car, like helping me load it all up. And so he saw this, and there was a moment where my body stiffened, and I had this like, this moment, this gut check of like, I need to tell him, hey, don't do that to me. You can't hit me like that. Well, luckily, I've been proud now. This is years and years and years in the making. So if you're a parent and that you did that, you acted on that impulse, let's just normalize that, right?
mhm.
I've spent years rewiring impulses, and they still get the better of me this a lot of times, but this time it didn't. And I was able to just say, whoa, you're like, okay, and play along with it. Like, whoa, that was really silly, hop in the car and reroute it. So there's a lot of layers there of performative parenting and that pressure, that outside pressure we feel. And the other piece of this that I'll say about performative parenting, something that just really gave me a lot of clarity and confidence in this, is identifying my core values. That is something I talk a ton to parents about in my like community when I'm working with them one on one. If you don't know what your core values are, there's no way you can be confident with why you're doing things with your kids and with other people. So understanding that, you can think that my child is being disrespectful. You can think that they're getting away with all this stuff. You can think that I'm not harsh enough with them. Well, one of my core values is curiosity. I want to understand what's going on here before I just react to it. So if I know I'm staying true to that core value in me, all of a sudden the chatter, the noise matters a whole lot less because it's not in alignment with what matters most to me. So that's what, like, core values, if you're like, what in the world is she talking about? You can Google this, you can do it yourself. Figure out your core values, and then you have something to stand on, like, and then the chatter, it's like just turning it down, even muting it. Like, okay,
Mhm.
you want to think like my kids are disrespectful, or you want to think that I'm not being harsh enough. Okay, sure. That's you, not me. I'm unflustered by it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
As
that's
a recovering people pleaser,
mhm.
hearing that
Mhm.
is hard, right? Like, I know you said
Uncomfortable,
you're
yeah.
recovering too, but it's like it's a
Mhm.
wild jump to make, right?
Mhm.
To go from caring about what every single person on the planet thinks of you to being like, "Okay, I'm gonna turn that off." And it's really interesting when I tell people this because if you follow me, you would think that I am not that way, right? Like I stand in my convictions. I'm very vocal
Mhm.
about a lot of things, but also similarly to you, it's taken a lot of work and a lot of years of practice. And that doesn't mean that
Mhm.
I am fully like, oh, yeah, this doesn't bother me whatsoever. And it comes easy to me because it does not. So I appreciate you saying that because I think that's something that like I could really use some time as a parent researching looking up, being really, really grounded in and feeling as though I can be confident about that, and knowing that that's okay. So I appreciate that. I think, and this is just my assumption, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. I think that a lot of the quote unquote discipline or the ways in which we've perceived it in the past has been this sense of needing control over children, right? Like particularly in American society, right?
For
It's
sure.
like,
Mhm.
why is that? Like, why do we have to feel? I mean, even as an educator, it took me a long time to be like, no, I don't need all of my students in kindergarten sitting down and being silent because that's what I see other classes doing, right? That's the
Right,
American way.
right,
So,
right.
first of all, what is this? What is this phenomenon with being obsessed with controlling children? And then second, how do we break free of that?
Okay, so this is so if we're talking like sociologists or something like anthropologists, right? We can go like super macro with this, like in a household. Me as a parent, why do I feel the need to have control over my children? We can also zoom out because I know you are very active in systems change, and we can talk about this on a macro level as well, because as individuals, we are influenced by macro systems at play.
So if we zoom out, I'll start out and then I'll go in. Okay. If we zoom out and we look at macro systems that have come at play, and I am not the expert in this, let me just tell you, but there are all kinds of the patriarchy is one of them, right? Children are to be seen and not heard. That even, I mean, it goes back farther than like the 1950s for sure. It goes back into like colonialism and all of this stuff. Uh, but even as recent as the 1950s, when the man primarily would come home from work, right? It was thought to be inappropriate for him to be disturbed by his children, which nowadays makes my head want to explode, because when my husband walks through the door from work, I'm like, here's the baby. He missed you all day. I'm going to go in my room and hide for a few minutes, like,
Yes, yes.
you can start dinner. Like, no. Um, there's no, you can decompress before you walk in through the door, because I don't get the luxury of decompression ever, you know?
Mhm.
Um, but back then that was not the case. So there has been all these systems that really started much further back, but we can look more modern history. And the patriarchy is one of them, colonizing, colonialism, like coming in, and how do you gain control of an area? You control the people, you obliterate the people, like all of these systems. So control quickly became this version of like survival. Compliance was to survive.
Hmm.
That's just what it was. And if we go back into like child psychology, or even the impetus of psychology, and we start talking about how children were once viewed, children for a while were viewed as little adults. So they had the same brain capacity. They were just miniature adults. And so there was no reason why they should be acting that way unless they were like possessed. They had demons in them. So they needed to be beat out of them. There were some really wild explanations for child behavior before we really started to understand child development and brain science and neurobiology. So these all really filtered into our culture of just how we treat and view children. And really, how we treat children starts with how we perceive them. So if we perceive them as having the same cognitive, the same thought processes as adults, then we're going to use the same kind of ways to get them in line, to get them to comply. And that just doesn't work. If you've ever tried that, it doesn't work, like
Mm-mm.
clearly. And so I always, to kind of bring it into like a micro system, right? In our own our own family, going through the generations. Things like people pleasing was a way to survive. to feed your family, to secure a job. I go back, and my family generations ago, they were coal miners. And they wound up fleeing the coal mines, literally in the dead of night, fleeing the coal mines, and moving into the suburbs. So that was the next generation working in the auto industry and factory workers. So you had to fit into a mold. You had to comply to be able to do that. And then my dad followed a very straight and narrow way to go to school and get a degree and become a professional, but he still has to fit in that box. He can't move from that box. And so now my generation, that's the first, like, we don't fit into a box anymore.
Mm.
We have the ability to take up space emotionally, and creatively, that previous generations didn't. They were trying to survive. And so that fear piece is so important, because fear is what drives so much traditional parenting. Fear of being disrespected, fear of being perceived as out of control, out of line. And then this is even more so, I've worked with, and then I refer them to other parent coaches or educators, but brown families where they are concerned because of their child's skin color. It's even more of a threat for their child to act a certain way in public. So they are even more threatened legitimately and have an even bigger fear response, truly a trauma response to their child, maybe their little boy just having a temper tantrum like little boys do. But my little boy having a temper tantrum, which I know people are listening, not hearing this, who's pale skin, is not as much of a threat. And even there, it's uncomfortable for me, but it's not as true threat as it would be. So there's a lot of fear there. And so we just layer this over and over and over again. And I think ultimately, even if we go back to colonialism, even if we go back to in our families surviving today, or the temper tantrum in the grocery store, fear, 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 fear. And interrupting the fear and coming from a place of when we are truly safe, saying, okay, I don't have to act from fear. I can act from something else, something higher. Now, there are people that there is fear, right? There is legitimate fear. And so this is coming from a place definitely of privilege, of not living with that fear every day. And so recognizing that, and then also recognizing if there is fear, how to find safety and all of those things, aligning yourself. So it's just so layered. And I know that kind of went down a rabbit hole that maybe you weren't thinking, but fear is, I think, everybody can identify with that in some way, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, no, I'm very appreciative that you went down that rabbit hole, though, because that is really important. It's like there have been numerous times, particularly because I was an educator in very different spaces, right, where Black and brown children were policed from the moment they stepped off the school bus and had to walk with their shirts tucked in and their arms behind their back. And like, truly, like, I mean, look up school to prison pipeline. Like, there's all these things that we could talk about, right? And then working in a more predominantly white school, kids were being kids. Kids were much more, quote unquote, free, and quite literally free. And they were being children. And actually, it's almost interesting because now I want to pick your brain about the fact that sometimes I would say in our culture that there are white parents who are letting their children be too free, right? They are actually being disrespectful. They are actually getting kind of like everything given to them, not having to feel discomfort, not having to do things for themselves, right? And that's probably where your discipline comes in through a lens of compassion. Because on the flip side of things, Black and brown families really do have to worry about every move that their children make. So then we're just perpetuating white supremacy. Honestly, if we're not, if we as white women are not raising our children to be respectful in those situations, right? I wasn't expecting this conversation to go here, but here we are.
This is such a beautiful nuance. No, it's such a beautiful nuance, and I'm so glad to pick up because, you know, now, so I have like the whole spectrum of early childhood in my house right now. I have a 1, 6, and 9-year-old. And so my 9-year-old has really exited out of early childhood, is now coming into middle childhood, and I can really see how all of the work it's so hands-on when they're little. And you're like, is this really mattering? Like, is this really impacting them? I don't know, because I keep having to do the same dang thing and I keep having to say the same darn words, you know, and now as a 9-year-old, he's independently functioning so much more in the world. Not obviously he's 9, not totally, but right, there's a big difference between like kindergartners and third graders. Huge. That's where we're at. And so, yes, I think what you're really, there's a couple of threads that you're really kind of highlighting with that statement of, are they too free? Are parents letting them get away for too much? Are they really not having to struggle for anything? Yes. And there's a few threads. I think the first one I want to pull on is really awareness. Before we can empathize with anybody, right, which is really what we want our children to be able to do, is put themselves in other people's shoes, right, take perspective. They have to be aware. They have to be aware of themselves, aware of how they're affecting their environment, impacting their environment. So highlighting that agency. They have to, how they're impacting other people. And within that agency, helping them feel empowered. Where is your control and where does your control end? And this is really tricky for a lot of parents to understand. I ultimately can't control my child. I can only control myself. So this would be an example of, you know, my kid is, oh, it was at the baseball field. Again, it was a different day, swinging around a bat, a metal bat. Okay. Appropriate place to be swinging a metal bat, right? A baseball field, but doing it in a way that wasn't safe. Like, wasn't aware of where he was in space, wasn't aware of where other people are in space relative to him. Probably wasn't aware of how fast he was swinging the bat and how dangerous it could potentially be if he hit somebody with it. Okay, so awareness was the first thing where I had to step into as a parent and say, hey, you're swinging that bat too much, like too far away from your body. It's getting too close to friends. You know, this is the place that it's safe to swing a bat, and this is how it's safe to swing a bat. You can swing it like you're about to hit a ball, not like a helicopter, okay? Like, let's be real. So just building that awareness is step one. Now, what if that awareness isn't enough? What if he becomes aware of it and he's like, this is more fun. I like it. And I think this is where gentle parenting or whatever really gets a bad name, because a lot of people think, oh, he's just a kid. Like, let him swing the bat. No. What do I have control over, right? I can't make him stop swinging the bat, but I can say, I'm going to give this bat to your coach until it's your time to hit. Or the coach, I see the coaches do this, can come over and say, this is the circle where you practice swinging your hit. Like, this is where you do it. They designate a space to do it. Or the bat's going back in the bat bag. We're done practicing batting today. Go get your glove. You know, like, we can then say, all right, he's not able right now. He's not able to like keep this safe, and the awareness isn't helping him. So now we need to up the support a little bit. We need to move him. We need to remove the bat. We need to have him do another activity. Something needs to be done additionally. So that to go back to the question of like, yes, awareness is step one, and then really giving them action steps and helping them feel empowered for this is what you can do. Because that empowerment to keep everybody safe, and that's what I always bring it back to keep our friends safe, to keep them safe. And then that empowers them, like that's when they're really young, that grows with them, that messaging of awareness, of how do I keep myself safe? How do I keep other people safe? How do my actions impact me? How do they impact other people? That awareness, what do I have control over and what don't I have control over? Where is appropriate control and where is inappropriate attempts for control? Those are the messages that as parents, we're always trying to figure out, that we're modeling those for our kids constantly. And our kids are constantly learning that, and they will go apply that one day in the real world. You know, like bullying, classic example, like bullying is a child trying to overexert power and control over another person. That's what that is. You know, so once again, working with, in this circumstance, a child who may be bullying and reminding them, like, where is your control, and empowering them. A bully actually needs more empowerment.
Yeah. I want to know what it is you do with parents to empower them to lead with kindness and empathy when it comes to parenting their children.
So I think number one is I talk a lot about connection and connecting with their kids. We have to connect with ourselves first, right? Anything. So when we talk about child development, children develop from the inside outward. So a baby learns trunk control, head control, that kind of stuff before they learn how to move their fingers and like grab toys and right, all of that. So it's the same kind of internal to external development. And so parents need to get in touch with, what are my goals? What are my values? You know, I call them non-negotiables. So I'll give you an example of like rolling in mud, for example. She's rolling in mud and today it's super safe. Like maybe it's fresh mud, or there's no, like, it's been cooler, so you're not worried about like flesh-eating bacteria or something. Like, I don't know, I'm just making things up. Like it's in a safe area, so there's not broken glass in there, you know, all those. So like, sure, it's fine. That's because you're operating from a place of one of your core values being safety, and also maybe adventure is a core value. I don't know, I'm making that up. And like, this is really adventurous for her. But maybe one day she goes out and, hey, it's mud, but maybe it was garbage day and they broke a bunch of glass in the recycling. And so now you're not sure if it's safe. So now all of a sudden it's no rolling in the mud. But why, Mommy? I really want to. Why? We can be compassionate, right? We can say and validate. We can say, you really want to roll in the mud? I get that. That was so fun the last time you did it. It's not safe today. There could be broken glass. I'm worried about the broken glass. I need to check and make sure it's safe before you roll. That doesn't mean her tantrum's going to stop about it. But as a parent, it's so much easier to stay calm and collected, to stay confident when we have that clarity based on our core value of safety. Because I'm not going to move the needle because there's no stretch of the imagination I want my child to roll in broken glass. Right. Yeah, so when I work with parents, that's what we talk about first, is really connecting with ourselves and getting clarity with ourselves, and then reaching out and connecting with our children. Look, parenting isn't a list of strategies. It's a relationship. We're building a relationship with our child, and we're getting to know a person as they're getting to know themselves. Like, they're growing into their identity. They're learning about their identity, their likes and dislikes, you know, their temperament, their personality, their social ability, their, you know, all of this stuff that we see through different stages of development. They're getting to know that, and we're getting to know them at the same time. So that's really then I focus so much on what I call proactive things. And proactive things are just really relationship building strategies, how to connect with our kids, how to slow down and attune to them so we can really just let who they are shine through and get to know that. And then maybe some kids really enjoy playful, silly, what I call high power connection activities. Maybe they don't. Maybe they rather sit and cuddle. Maybe they don't. Maybe they just want to sit and talk to you. They like talk at you, there's no conversation there. So that's really where we start, even before we start troubleshooting challenging behavior, because that's what everybody wants. But I'm like, okay, that's step 25.
Yeah. Give me the quick fix. Come on, Caley.
We'll get there eventually, but I would not be standing in my truth and standing in my integrity if I pretended like, well, let me give you this script to say when your child whines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes so much sense. Where can people find you, support you, check out your work? Tell us all of the things.
Okay, so I told you before we started recording, I took a little leave of absence from social media. I'm starting to dip my toe back in. So my accounts are still up. They're still live. You can still find a ton of my content just at Caley Kukla, my name, CaleyKukla, on Instagram. I've been dabbling in TikTok a little bit. I find those videos just really easy to make, like fun and
too.
easy.
Yeah.
Right? Something about that platform, it's a little easier than Meta.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Hopefully it stays, but
yeah, I know, right? So, social is there, and I'm dipping my toe back into it. But my website, KayleeKukla.com, is really just houses a lot of my work, where you can access me directly. And that's kind of, I talked about like going external or going internal before going external. We just had a year of a lot happening in our family with the arrival of our third child. And so I've had to go drastically internally, and I just enjoy one-on-one more, face-to-face interpersonal relationships more than, and that's why kind of that external social has kind of paused, but maybe by the time this airs, it'll be back on. We'll see.
Yeah, here's hoping, because I truly enjoy your content. That's how we connected. So I hope it will be, but I also wholeheartedly support everyone's journey when it comes to social media, because it is not easy. So I am hoping before you go, you could share with us what your true definition of kindness is.
I believe kindness is a verb. Let me just say
Yeah.
that. So kindness is the actions we take to acknowledge our own humanity, our own needs, and meet those, and then extend that humanity out to others.
That's so powerful and so true.
It's just shared humanness. Like, we're acknowledging. And I think maybe that's what I got disillusioned and disconnected from social media for a little bit, because I just felt like people forget that there's humans, like we're human. And even if you disagree with me on a certain point, or if I make a mistake and you're calling me out and berating me over something, we share more in our just humanness than we do our differences.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I appreciate that reminder and all that you do. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you everyone for listening to this awesome episode with Caley. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the Kindness Is podcast. If you love it and it's adding even a little bit of value to your life, we would love if you could subscribe, rate, and review so we can reach even more people and make this world a little bit more kind.